see me, you Stevie, wondering how I reach more evolutions than Eevee and make it look easy.
What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Ernie the Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. Today's video, we're going to be talking about Storm number 3. This is one I've been sitting on for a little bit because I got to take a little peek, see a little, pull up the curtain a little bit. And I gotta admit, man, this issue was fun. There's a lot of really cool stuff going on here. When last we left off with Storm, she had just gotten the news that she is dying of radiation poisoning, and she sought the help of the one person in the universe who could actually aid her in what's going on, and that is the Ungen Supreme himself, Dr. Voodoo. I would have liked to have seen more Dr. Voodoo in this. However, I will say that the time with Dr. Voodoo is not wasted. In this particular instance, Dr. Voodoo basically cuts a deal for Storm, and it effectively removes all sign of illness, disease, whatever the case may be. It removes it completely from Storm, including the radiation poisoning. It still leaves Storm with a huge problem. She is still plagued by death sprites. These are spirits that both himself, as well as his dead brother Daniel, a spirit himself, can see. And as Dr. Voodoo points out, he sees more death sprites surrounding Storm than he has ever seen around anyone else. And we gotta remember that Dr. Voodoo spends a lot of time around Avengers and Defenders and people at the Strange Academy. He has been a hero for a long time, going all the way back to Strange Tales number 169 in 1973. This guy is not some newbie on the street. He has never seen this many death sprites surrounding one person. Death sprites are a clear spiritual warning that someone is destined to die, and maybe not right then, maybe not tomorrow, maybe sometime down the road, but doom is impending for that person. And we know for a fact, just based on the first issue alone of the series, that Storm is going to have to face down death at some point. We know that eternity is watching over her. And I do find it really interesting just based on the fact that, and I know I haven't talked really much about the Phoenix series as of late. It's really just largely because there have been a ton of X books just dropping all the time. And while I did make a huge effort to try and cover every Krakoa era X book, let's be real, there were weeks where that just wasn't feasible. I think this week, I want to say like 5 or 6 different X comics came out. That's just way too many videos to be making. So I'll just say this right here, right now. Phoenix, for those who have not been keeping up with that series, Eternity has been hanging out over on that side of things as well, keeping up with what Jean Grey has been doing as of late. Eternity himself has been coaching up Jean Grey on how to be a better god. Because as we know right now, Jean Grey and the Phoenix are one now and forever, or until Marvel decides that's not a thing anymore. But right now, that's the case, and Jean is effectively a god and a primordial cosmic entity in the Marvel Comics universe. She has to carry herself differently. It's why she's been roaming and gallivanting across the stars and trying to do the most good she can, not just on Earth, but all the way out across the far reaches of space. It is largely thanks to Eternity that Jean Grey is able to cope with her new abilities and get a better understanding of the balance that she is now a part of. And with Eternity already eyeballing Storm, I think it's safe to say Storm is heading towards a very similar trajectory. Eternity has said to himself he wants his eternal Storm. He has found her worthy, but she is going to be tested first, and she is going to have to face down death itself before she actually reaches that upper echelon. Now, one thing I can say that we're probably not going to see anytime soon, at least if Dr. Voodoo has anything to say about it, he does make an offhand comment that he doubts that Storm will ever reclaim her magic legacy, her heritage, something I've talked about off and on a great deal on this channel about, and if you have no clue what I'm talking about, it's up here. And while I find that disheartening, the promise of what Storm is to become, I think, actually kind of dwarfs that. The idea of Storm steamrolling her way towards becoming the Eternal Storm, getting a power upgrade, I don't know, I feel like this is too much of a coincidence to not be something to look forward to. I think that the idea of Eternity keeping tabs on not just Jean Grey, but also keeping their ever-watchful eye on Storm, deeming her worthy to become what is effectively a herald of Eternity itself. I'm sorry, that just is too big of an idea to not get paid off somewhere down the road. And I've been saying this for a while. ever since you kind of seen some early, I don't know, hints and teases that there's a lot of similarity between the Stephanie Phillips Phoenix series and the Marewa Ayodele Storm series. There just seems to be a lot of parallels there. And I'm sorry, Marvel, if you do not make this a thing, if there is not a Storm Jean Grey crossover or companion book or story arc, kind of like what they're doing with the Uncanny X-Men and X-Men with Raid on Greymalk, if there's not a, I don't know, the Rise of Eternity, if there is not a something like that along those lines, I'm sorry, Marvel, you're cooked. It is too big of an idea to not go with. I'm going to say right now, Tom, I don't know if you're watching. I know a lot of the X-writers tend to tune in on these videos, but you know, I don't know if you do, but if you are watching, or if one of you, the awesome writers at the X office right now, if y'all are watching this, if you pass this along to Tom, just say, hey, look, Phoenix Storm, Storm Phoenix, I don't really care who gets top billing here, but yeah, it needs to happen. I'm just gonna put that out there. It needs to happen. I'm not talking about a fight. I don't want to see Jean and Storm fighting. They're literally probably two of the closest friends ever in the history of Marvel. I don't want to see that. I just want to see buddy cop, Storm Jean, cosmic entities doing what cosmic entities do. That's it. Speaking of things that should be a license to print money, you should be going to go check out the Kickstarter for the black comedy series about a comic book shop called The Comic Shop. It's a mockumentary series in the same vein as shows like The Office or Parks and Rec or Abbott Elementary, but this one in particular focuses on a little comic shop based out of LA called OMG Comics. And it's a comic shop that's not doing particularly well either, and they're trying everything in their power to try and stay afloat. It's one of those types of shows that's going to have a lot of quirky characters in it. It's an idea that series creator Cheyenne Ewulu has been trying to get out there for a while, and I kept thinking, this is a thing that should be made. This is a thing that should exist, and for whatever reason, it just doesn't. So in order for this thing to happen, we as nerds have to get behind this and try and help make it a thing. So I think right now, as of the recording of this video, and probably by the time that it posts, the Kickstarter for it, where I think it is asking for like $160,000, it is actually already at $111,000. Like right now, as I'm looking at it, it's so close with only a few days left. So if this sounds like something that you'd be interested in, go check out the link in the description or in the pinned comment below, and let's try and make the comic shop a real thing.
That is what's up. That is what's up.
Is it just me, or is that poster doing the lean with it, rock with it?
There is a price to pay for Storm being cleansed of the radiation poisoning that she suffered in the last 2 issues, and it's pretty simple. She cannot use her powers for 7 days. In this issue, we only get to see the first 6 days of that 7 that Storm has to go without her powers, and to be fair, it's a small price to pay, though technically for someone in Storm's position, someone who is currently trying to save the world in every single way that she can, as well as also being an active member of the Avengers roster, yeah, it would make sense that that would still, even though it's a small price, it is still a high price for a superhero of her stature to pay. However, compared to the alternatives, as Dr. Voodoo points out, she would either have to give up several decades of her own lifespan or have to give up particular organs from her body. It just makes sense that this is the route that was gone. I mean, yeah, 7 days, no powers. Definitely. And I know some people will probably be iffy on the fact that Storm had no agency in this choice. I mean, to be fair, yeah, probably would have been better if she did, but at the end of the day, I think what Dr. Voodoo says makes a lot of sense. Storm would have taken the easy win on this one. Dr. Voodoo literally spoke to what he refers to as an ancient spirit on her behalf, a dark spirit named Egun, who was also offering up the option of Storm losing memories as repayment for curing her. Memories like how to breathe for 7 long months. This strikes me as a type of spirit who kind of has a little bit of a trickster bend to it. Will this pay some dividends down the road? Is this going to be a spirit that is going to come to collect somewhere down the road? I don't think that'll be the case. I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see if anything else comes of this. That said, the devil is always in the details. I'm looking more specifically at the exact wording of Dr. Voodoo. He's not saying she doesn't have her powers for 7 days. He says she is not to use them for 7 days. She has her abilities. There will come a temptation later. We're going to talk about that temptation a little later. There is going to come a temptation to use them. And the real question is going to be whether or not she falls for that temptation. But getting back to it, it puts Storm in a pretty weird place right now. And it's the simple fact that there are some shenanigans that take place after she gets cleared and becomes the healthiest person in the entire universe. You know, thanks to Dr. Voodoo, she reunites with her fellow X-Men, specifically the Uncanny X-Men. She's hanging out with Rogue and Gambit, Wolverine, and Nightcrawler. Well, and right now, Jubilee's probably not around because she is in Greymalkin, and the whole raid on Greymalkin thing is still going on. But point is, Storm pulls up and surprises the gang, and when she does, some really wild shenanigans happen, and I'll just say they involve Wolverine. I'll leave it at that. And while Storm is not necessarily proud of what happens between her and Wolverine, the real ominous thing that's going to happen here is what comes next, and it's the fact that she has been invited to Latveria, and by none other than the new Sorcerer Supreme himself, Dr. Doom. We know that Dr. Doom is going to be looming large over all proceedings in the Marvel Comics universe for roughly the next year or so. One World Under Doom does not officially kick off until I believe somewhere around mid-January to like early February. But right now, Dr. Doom requests Storm's audience, and this is going to be a very interesting meeting because over the course of Storm's history, what is about roughly almost 50 years worth of history in the Marvel Comics universe, as of next year, she will be meeting Dr. Doom not for the first time. She will be meeting him for, probably safer to say, 7th or 8th time, at least in this kind of setting. But one thing I do find interesting about this, going back to Dr. Voodoo's words from earlier, talking about how, Storm will never see the day that she reclaims her magical heritage, Dr. Doom is someone who could probably actually get that back to her. Now, I'm not saying that's what's going to happen because, once again, we don't know. But I do find it interesting. Dr. Doom wants to have a conversation with her. Their last conversation didn't go quite as well as Dr. Doom would have hoped. And I have found it interesting that Dr. Doom has often thirsted for Storm in the past. Actually, one of their earliest meetings was during her time with the X-Men back, early in her run with the team. And it was at that moment where her magic potential had seemingly become unlocked, when she was encased in metal and her claustrophobia had caused her to unleash the raging storm within herself, and for a very brief time elevated her to something that was not too dissimilar from what Jean was like when she was the Phoenix. It was an empowered state that we've never seen Storm in ever since, but something very similar could happen once again. Another thing to take of note, though, is that when they met during the Krakoan era and Doom wanted to parlay with Storm, he shot his shot, he tried to make moves, but Storm, being the formidable goddess that she is, Doom did not get what he wanted. Here, it seems like Dr. Doom is in the position of power now, because once again, what Dr. Voodoo said is very specific. She doesn't necessarily not have her powers, she's just been highly encouraged not to use them. I mentioned earlier that the ancient spirit that Dr. Voodoo conversed with said that that's all they wanted, for her to not use her powers for 7 days, which makes me wonder if this is a spirit that knew that Dr. Doom was going to ask for her to come to Latveria, and if maybe they are hoping maybe to test her in that way. And who's to say that this ancient spirit, who knows? It could have been eternity. Who knows? There's a lot of what ifs and could have beens and should have beens and maybe might have ought to be's involved in all this, and who knows, I'll actually maybe get to ask Morewa about this because he is going to be on the channel here coming up very soon. I believe on the 15th I'm going to be speaking with him, so make sure you tune in for that. That's going to be a thing you're definitely not going to want to miss. I would be curious to see if in these next upcoming issues, when Storm meets Dr. Doom, if he does not press her in such a way to use her powers, what if she uses them and something bad happens? Like, oh, this ancient spirit reveals himself. Will it be eternity? Will it be some other entity? Who's to say? But this is day 6 of 7, so that means that Storm is going to be going into the lion's den and not having any powers to back herself up. She's only going to have her raw talents, her natural talents, to be able to contend with Doom. Considering all the death sprites surrounding Storm, part of me wonders if those death sprites have anything to do with Storm's upcoming meeting with Dr. Doom for that matter. If there was ever an actual point in time where Storm could be in a position to die, especially at a time where she is not allowed to use her Omega level mutant abilities, if there was ever a time the Storm's life would be in peril, it would probably be now. But I don't think Dr. Doom is going to be her downfall, at least not in terms of losing her life. Now, that said, Storm has gone a long time without powers in the past. She led the X-Men for the better part of a few years without any abilities to speak of whatsoever, outside of her natural gifts. So I don't think Storm is in any trouble here. As a matter of fact, Storm has a plan up her sleeve for Doom because, as she states in this issue, Doom is largely harmless to her because he does have an infatuation with her. One of the saddest days of his life was the day that Storm married T'Challa. So there is already an in with Doom right there. Not only that, but Storm is also a character who is able to read the room. She knows that right now Doom holds a lot of power. He's Sorcerer Supreme. While we know he's going to use that very same power to be Sorcerer Supreme, to lord it over the entire Earth, to mold it into his image, because to him, that is what saving the world looks like. If, for whatever reason, Storm can use her connections to him in order to gain mutant kind some level of favor, she's willing to do it, so long as it doesn't compromise her principles. To be fair, this wouldn't be the first time that an X-Man of her caliber would have done such a thing. We can't forget that during Secret Empire, Beast parlayed with Captain America. Now granted, it was not the greatest of situations, and Hydra Cap was always more than happy to remind Beast of his place in the Hydra Empire. This is a somewhat different situation. Storm is not as morally conflicted as Beast was at that time. She still has her scruples, she still has her beliefs, the things that she holds dear to. Her meeting with Doom, a Sorcerer Supreme now, is going to be a must-read, to say the least.